Evie Carter thought Christmas Eve would be just another night of counting tips and dodging her violent ex-boyfriend's threats. She never imagined that one desperate leap into a stranger's car would thrust her and her traumatized little brother into the dangerous world of Luca DeLuca, a ruthless mafia boss whose icy heart had been frozen solid for 3 years. What started as a panicked escape from a monster became something neither of them saw coming. A collision between a woman who'd lost everything and a man who'd sworn never to care again. But when bullets start flying and old enemies close in, Evie will discover that sometimes the most dangerous place to hide is behind the walls of someone else's broken heart. Because in Luca's world, love isn't just a risk. It's a weapon that could destroy them all. Subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this Christmas tale is about to get a whole lot more twisted than any holiday movie you've ever seen. The snow fell harder as Evie Carter pulled her thin coat tighter around her shoulders. Her feet ached from standing all day at the diner, serving coffee and smiles to customers who barely looked at her. Christmas Eve should have felt magical, but all she felt was tired and scared. She climbed the creaky stairs to Mrs. Henderson's apartment, where 7-year-old Jamie waited for her. The old woman answered the door with a sad smile. "He's been so quiet today," Mrs. Henderson whispered. "Didn't say a word, just sat by the window watching the snow." Evie's heart broke a little more. Jamie hadn't spoken since the accident 6 months ago. The doctors said there was nothing wrong with his voice. The trauma had stolen his words, and Evie didn't know how to give them back. "Thank you for watching him," Evie said, counting out the last $20 from her tip jar. It was all she had until next week. Jamie appeared in the doorway, his dark hair messy and his brown eyes too old for his young face. He wore the same worn jeans and sweater he'd had for months. Evie couldn't afford new clothes, not when rent was due and the bills kept piling up. "Ready to go home, buddy?" she asked, forcing brightness into her voice. Jamie nodded and slipped his small hand into hers. His fingers felt like ice. They walked down the snowy sidewalk toward their tiny apartment. Evie tried not to think about the eviction notice tucked in her purse or the angry messages from Rick that made her phone buzz all day. Her ex-boyfriend had been getting worse since she'd finally found the courage to leave him 2 months ago. The streetlights cast long shadows on the white ground. Evie glanced over her shoulder and saw headlights moving slowly behind them. Her stomach tightened. The car had been following them for 2 blocks. "Come on, Jamie," she whispered, pulling him closer. "Let's walk a little faster." The car's engine rumbled behind them, getting closer. Evie's hands shook as she fumbled for her keys outside their building. The headlights stopped right at the curb. They made it inside and up the stairs to their small apartment. Evie locked the door and checked the windows twice. Jamie climbed onto the couch and wrapped himself in the old blanket their mom had made before she died. Evie counted the bills spread across their tiny kitchen table. Rent was due in 3 days, and she was short by $200. The electric company had sent a final notice. The gas bill was overdue. And now Rick's messages were getting scary. Her phone buzzed. Another text from him. "I know where you work. I know where you live. You can't hide from me." Evie deleted the message, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She looked at Jamie, who was staring at nothing with those sad eyes. He needed stability, safety, a warm home. She was failing him. "Hey, buddy," she said softly, sitting beside him on the couch. "Want me to read you a story?" Jamie shook his head, but moved closer to her. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling how thin he'd gotten. She tried to remember the last time she'd seen him truly smile. "Everything's going to be okay," she whispered into his hair. "I promise." The words felt empty. How could she promise anything when she had no idea how to keep them safe? Around midnight, someone started pounding on the door. hard, angry knocks that made the whole apartment shake. "Evie!" Rick's voice cut through the thin wood. "Open this door. I know you're in there." Evie's blood turned to ice. She grabbed Jamie's hand and pulled him toward the back of the apartment. The fire escape window was old and stuck, but she managed to push it open. "We have to go," she whispered to Jamie. "Right now." The pounding got louder. Rick was drunk again. That made him twice as dangerous. Evie helped Jamie climb out onto the metal fire escape. The snow stung their faces as they hurried down the slippery steps. Behind them, they could hear Rick kicking at the door. They reached the alley and ran. Evie's heart pounded as they moved through the shadows between buildings. Jamie's hand was small and cold in hers. Where could they go? It was Christmas Eve, and everything was closed. She had no money for a hotel. They reached the main street, breathing hard. The snow was falling so thick she could barely see. That's when she spotted the black car idling at the curb. The engine was running, and warm air puffed from the exhaust pipe. Without thinking, Evie pulled open the back door and pushed Jamie inside. She climbed in after him, gasping from the cold and fear. "Drive, please," she begged. "Someone's chasing us." A man's voice, deep and cold, came from the front seat. "Who are you?" Evie looked up and met the darkest eyes she'd ever seen. The man was maybe 35, with black hair and sharp features. He wore an expensive suit and had the kind of face that belonged in movies. But his eyes were like winter ice. "I'm sorry," Evie stammered. "I thought this was a cab. Please, there's a man after us. We just need—" "Get out." His voice was flat and final. Jamie pressed closer to Evie, shivering. She could see Rick's car turning the corner, headlights sweeping across the street. "Please," she whispered. "My little brother. He's just a kid. The man chasing us is dangerous." The stranger looked at Jamie, who was staring at him with wide, scared eyes. For a moment, something flickered across the man's face. Then he turned to the driver. "Marco, lose the tail." The car pulled away from the curb with smooth power. Evie held Jamie tight as they watched Rick's beat-up sedan fall behind in the swirling snow. "Thank you," she breathed. The man didn't answer. He made a quiet phone call, speaking words she couldn't quite hear. His presence filled the car like a storm cloud. Everything about him screamed danger, from his perfectly styled hair to the way he held himself like a weapon waiting to strike. But he'd helped them. When she'd been desperate and scared, this stranger had chosen to protect them instead of turning them away. "What's your name?" she asked. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Luca." Just one word, spoken like it was all she needed to know. The car moved through the empty streets while snow painted everything white. Jamie had stopped shivering, but he kept staring at Luca with curious eyes. It was the most alert Evie had seen him in months. "Where do you live?" Luca asked. Evie thought about their tiny apartment with Rick probably breaking down the door right now. "I don't know. We can't go home." Luca was quiet for a long moment. Then he gave Marco an address Evie didn't recognize. They drove through a part of the city she'd never seen, where the houses got bigger and the snow looked cleaner. Finally, the car stopped in front of massive iron gates. They opened automatically, and they drove up a long driveway to a house that looked like a castle. Evie's stomach dropped. What kind of man lived in a place like this? What had she gotten them into? "Come on," Luca said, getting out of the car. The mansion's front door was enormous, made of dark wood with iron details. Inside, everything was rich and beautiful. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings. Thick carpets covered polished floors. Oil paintings in gold frames lined the walls. A woman appeared from somewhere in the house. She was maybe 55, with gray hair pulled back and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "This is Teresa," Lucas said. "She'll get you something to eat." "Oh, honey," Teresa said, taking in Evie's thin coat and Jamie's pale face. "You both look half frozen. Come to the kitchen." Evie wanted to refuse. She'd learned not to accept charity, not to depend on anyone. But Jamie was so thin and cold, and the warm house smelled like bread and coffee. In the enormous kitchen, Teresa set out bowls of soup and thick slices of fresh bread. Jamie ate like he was starving, which broke Evie's heart because he probably was. Luca sat across from them, watching with those dark eyes. He'd taken off his suit jacket, revealing white shirt sleeves rolled up over strong forearms. There was something about the way he moved, controlled and careful, like he was always ready for trouble. "What's his name?" Luca asked, nodding toward Jamie. "Jamie, he's my brother." Evie didn't mention that he hadn't spoken in 6 months. She didn't explain about the accident or their parents or any of the horrible things that had brought them to this moment. Jamie finished his soup and looked around the kitchen with wonder. Then he did something that made Evie's breath catch. He tore off a piece of bread and held it out to Luca. Luca stared at the small offering. For just a second, his cold mask slipped, and Evie saw something raw and painful flash across his face. Then he took the bread. "Thank you," he said quietly. It was such a simple moment, but it felt huge. Jamie hadn't shown kindness to anyone in months, and this dangerous stranger had accepted it like it meant something. After dinner, Teresa showed them to a guest room that was bigger than their entire apartment. It had a huge bed with soft blankets and its own bathroom with hot water and thick towels. "I don't understand," Evie said when Teresa left them alone. "Why is he helping us?" But Jamie was already curled up under the blankets, fast asleep. For the first time in months, he looked peaceful. Evie sat by the window, watching snow fall over the mansion's gardens. Everything was beautiful and safe and completely unreal. Tomorrow they'd have to leave. She'd figure out somewhere else to go, some way to keep Jamie safe from Rick. But tonight, for the first time in months, she wasn't afraid. Down the hall, Luca stood in his study, staring at a framed photo on his desk. A woman with gentle eyes smiled back at him, holding a little girl who looked just like her. They'd been gone for 3 years now, killed by a drunk driver on a snowy night just like this one. He'd built walls around his heart so high that nothing could get through. He'd made himself into something cold and hard, someone who solved problems with money and power and fear. But then a scared woman and a silent boy had tumbled into his car, and something inside those walls had cracked. When the boy had offered him bread, it felt like a gift from another world. A reminder that kindness still existed somewhere beyond the darkness of his life. He picked up the chess piece from his desk, a white knight his daughter used to play with. Without thinking, he walked down the hall and quietly opened the guest room door. Jamie was asleep, but his small hand was reaching toward the empty space beside him, like he was looking for something to hold on to. Luca set the chess piece on the nightstand where the boy would see it when he woke up. It was a small thing, but it felt like the first good choice he'd made in years. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering their tracks and giving them all a fresh start they didn't know they needed. Evie woke up to sunlight streaming through windows bigger than any she'd ever seen. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered. The mansion, Luca, the way Jamie had offered him bread like they were old friends. Jamie was already awake, sitting up in bed and staring at something in his hands. The white chess piece. He turned it over and over, his face more curious than scared. "Where did that come from?" Evie asked softly. Jamie pointed toward the door, then back at the chess piece. Someone had left it for him during the night. Evie's phone buzzed. Her heart stopped when she saw Rick's name on the screen. The message made her blood run cold. "I know where you are now. Nice place. Be a shame if something happened to it." How had he found them so fast? Evie's hands shook as she deleted the message, but she couldn't delete the fear crawling up her spine. A soft knock came at the door. Teresa's voice called out, "Breakfast is ready when you are, dear." They found their way to a dining room that could have seated 20 people. Luca sat at one end of a long wooden table, reading something on his phone. He wore dark jeans and a gray sweater that made his eyes look even more intense. "Good morning," he said, not looking up. Jamie climbed into the chair next to Luca instead of sitting by Evie. This surprised her. Jamie never went near strangers, especially men, but something about Luca felt safe to him. Teresa brought out plates of eggs, bacon, and toast, real butter and fresh orange juice. Jamie ate everything, and Evie tried not to cry watching him enjoy food that didn't come from a box or can. "We should go," Evie said when breakfast was finished. "We've imposed enough." "Go where?" Luca asked. Evie had been asking herself the same question all morning. Their apartment wasn't safe. She had no money for a hotel, no family to turn to, no friends who could help. "I'll figure something out," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Luca set down his coffee cup. "Your ex found you last night within hours of you leaving home. How long do you think you'll stay hidden without help?" Before Evie could answer, a man appeared in the doorway. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with careful eyes that took in everything at once. "This is Marco," Luca said. "Tell her what you found." Marco looked uncomfortable. "Rick Malone has connections we didn't expect. He's been talking to some people who don't like to lose track of things they think belong to them." "What does that mean?" Evie asked. "It means he's not just some angry ex-boyfriend," Luca said. "He's got backing from people who make problems disappear." The room felt colder. Evie pulled Jamie closer to her, but he wiggled away and moved back to Luca's side. It was like he sensed safety there. "You'll stay here until this is resolved," Luca said. It wasn't a request. "We can't," Evie started. "You can't what? Take care of yourselves? You proved that wrong last night when you jumped in a stranger's car." His words stung because they were true. She had failed to protect Jamie. She'd run out of options and gotten lucky that Luca had decided to help instead of hurt them. "I don't like being told what to do," she said. "And I don't like having my peaceful morning disrupted by people running from trouble. But here we are." They stared at each other across the fancy dining room. Evie felt trapped between gratitude and pride, safety and independence. She didn't want to need anyone, especially not someone who looked at her like she was a problem to solve. Jamie tugged on Luca's sleeve and pointed toward another room. Luca followed his gaze and nodded. "Would you like to see the rest of the house?" he asked Jamie. Jamie nodded eagerly. It was the first real enthusiasm Evie had seen from him since their parents died. The mansion was like something from a movie. Room after room filled with beautiful things. Paintings, sculptures, furniture that probably cost more than Evie made in a year. But everything felt cold, like a museum instead of a home. Jamie stopped in front of a room with glass doors. Inside was the most amazing chess set Evie had ever seen. The pieces were carved from black and white stone, each one detailed and beautiful. "Can we go in?" Evie asked. Luca hesitated, then opened the doors. This room felt different from the rest of the house. Warmer somehow. There were bookshelves filled with actual books, a fireplace with comfortable chairs nearby, and windows that looked out over snow-covered gardens. Jamie went straight to the chess set. He picked up the white knight, the same piece as the one he'd found by his bed, and held it carefully. "Do you know how to play?" Luca asked. Jamie shook his head but didn't put the piece down. "I could teach you," Luca said quietly. "If you want." For the next hour, Evie watched something magical happen. Luca's cold mask disappeared as he patiently showed Jamie how each piece moved. Jamie listened with complete attention, nodding and asking questions with his eyes and hands. When Jamie smiled for the first time in months, Evie had to turn away to hide her tears. "He likes you," she said when they took a break. "Kids see things differently," Luca replied. "They trust easier." "Should they?" Luca was quiet for a long moment. "In my world, trust is a luxury most people can't afford. But your brother—" He watched Jamie carefully arranging the chess pieces. "He reminds me that some things are worth protecting." That evening, after Jamie fell asleep, Evie found herself alone with Luca in his study. The room was dark except for a fire crackling in the fireplace and a single lamp by his desk. "Tell me about him," Luca said, pouring himself a drink from a crystal bottle. "Jamie? He doesn't talk." Evie curled up in one of the leather chairs by the fire. For some reason, the darkness made it easier to speak. "Our parents died in a car accident 6 months ago. Jamie was with them. He saw everything." She took a shaky breath. "The doctors say there's nothing wrong with his vocal cords. He just stopped talking. I think words feel too dangerous now." Luca stared into the fire. "How old were you when you became responsible for him?" 28, old enough to know better, apparently." Evie tried to smile, but failed. "I thought I could handle it. Get a job, find a place to live, make him feel safe again. But I'm failing at everything." "You kept him alive. You kept him with you when the system would have put him in foster care. You ran when he was in danger. That's not failing. I got us both into this mess. If I hadn't been so stupid about Rick—" "How long were you with him?" 2 years. He seemed nice at first, charming, said he wanted to take care of us." Evie's voice got smaller. "I thought Jamie needed a father figure. I was so wrong." "What changed?" "Rick started drinking more, getting angry about little things. Jamie was afraid of him, but I told myself it would get better. Then one night, Rick grabbed Jamie's arm hard enough to leave bruises." Evie's hands clenched into fists. "I left the next day, but Rick won't let go. He says we belong to him." Luca's jaw tightened. "No one belongs to anyone else." "Is that why you helped us? Because you don't like men who hurt kids." Instead of answering, Luca got up and picked a photo from his desk. He handed it to Evie without a word. The picture showed a beautiful woman with dark hair and gentle eyes. She was holding a little girl who couldn't have been more than 5, with pigtails and a gap-toothed grin. "My wife and daughter," Luca said simply. "Sophia and Isabella." Evie's heart broke at the past tense. What happened? "Drunk driver, 3 years ago, Christmas Eve." His voice was completely flat, like he'd trained all the emotion out of it. "I was supposed to pick them up from Sophia's mother's house. Got delayed with business. They took a cab instead." "Luca, I'm so sorry." "Isabella was 7, the same age as Jamie." He took the photo back and stared at it. "She loved chess. I taught her to play when she was 5. She always wanted to be the knight because knights protect the other pieces." Now Evie understood why he'd given Jamie the chess piece, why he'd been so patient teaching him to play. Jamie reminded him of the daughter he'd lost. "Is that why you live in this big house all alone?" she asked. "I live alone because it's safer that way. When you care about people, they become targets." Luca set the photo back on his desk. "My world is dangerous, Evie. People use the things you love to hurt you." "Then why are you helping us?" He looked at her across the firelit room, and for a moment she saw past the cold mask to the man underneath. A man carrying so much pain that it had frozen his heart solid. "I don't know," he admitted, "but when Jamie offered me that bread last night, it was the first time in 3 years that anyone had given me something without wanting something back." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to glowing coals. Evie felt like she understood Luca better now. He wasn't just a rich man playing hero. He was someone who'd lost everything that mattered and built walls so high that nothing could hurt him again. But somehow, Jamie had found a crack in those walls. The next morning brought bad news. Marco found Evie in the kitchen while she helped Teresa prepare lunch. "We've got a problem," he said quietly. "Rick's not working alone anymore. He's connected to the Torino family. They're small time, but they don't like losing face." "What does that mean for us?" Evie asked. "It means this isn't just about getting you back anymore. It's about proving they can't be outsmarted by some guy hiding behind money and walls." Teresa made a worried sound and started praying under her breath in what sounded like Italian. "What's Luca going to do?" Evie asked. Marco's expression was grim. "What he always does. Whatever it takes to protect what's his." That afternoon, the mansion felt different. There were more men around, all wearing suits and serious expressions. They moved through the house like shadows, checking windows and doors and talking in quiet voices. Jamie seemed to sense the tension. He stayed close to Luca, clutching his chess piece and watching everything with worried eyes. "Are we in trouble?" Evie asked when she found Luca in his study. "Not you. Me." He was loading bullets into a gun with practiced efficiency. "By helping you, I made this my problem. The Torinos see that as disrespect. This is my fault. If you hadn't gotten into my car, you and Jamie would be dead by now." Luca's voice was matter-of-fact. "Rick wasn't planning to take you back, Evie. He was planning to make sure no one else could have you either." The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. She'd known Rick was getting worse, but she hadn't realized how far he'd fallen into darkness. That night, they lost power for exactly 3 minutes. When it came back on, 2 of Luca's men were escorting an intruder off the property. He was bleeding from his nose and limping. "Just a scout," Marco told Luca, "testing our defenses." "And now they know what they're up against," Luca replied. "Double the guard rotation. No one sleeps alone." Evie found Jamie in the study, hiding under the chess table and clutching his white knight so hard his knuckles were white. She crawled under the table with him and pulled him close. "It's okay, buddy. We're safe here." But even as she said the words, she wondered if anywhere was really safe anymore. Rick had found them once. He'd find them again. And next time, he wouldn't send just one man to test their defenses. Luca appeared in the doorway. "Pack your things. You're moving to the secure wing tonight." "Is that necessary?" Evie asked. "Would you rather find out the hard way?" The secure wing was like a fortress within the fortress. Thick doors, bulletproof windows, and guards stationed at every entrance. Their new room was smaller but comfortable, with everything they needed. As Evie tucked Jamie into bed, she realized he still hadn't spoken. The chess lessons and warm meals and sense of safety hadn't been enough to bring back his voice. Maybe nothing ever would. But when Luca came to say goodnight, Jamie held out his arms for a hug. And when Luca hugged him back, his cold mask slipped again, revealing the grieving father underneath. "Sweet dreams, little knight," Luca whispered. Jamie smiled and settled into sleep, finally looking peaceful despite the danger circling outside their walls. Evie watched Luca straighten the blankets around Jamie with gentle hands. This dangerous man who lived in a mansion like a fortress, who carried guns and commanded respect through fear, was being completely tender with a traumatized little boy. And despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the knowledge that they were living in a world where people got hurt for caring about the wrong things, Evie felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Evie couldn't sleep. Every small sound made her heart race. The wind against the windows, footsteps in the hallway, the distant hum of security systems. She checked on Jamie 3 times before midnight. He slept peacefully, the white chess piece clutched in his small fist. The secure wing felt like a beautiful prison. Safe, but trapped. She wondered how long they could live this way, surrounded by guards and thick walls, before it started to feel normal, before Jamie forgot what the outside world looked like. Around 2 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and walked to the small kitchen attached to their suite. Someone had stocked it with everything they could need: coffee, snacks, even Jamie's favorite cereal that she'd mentioned to Teresa days ago. The attention to detail should have been comforting. Instead, it made her feel helpless. She'd spent her whole life taking care of herself and Jamie. Now she couldn't even make breakfast without someone else providing the food. "Can't sleep either?" Evie spun around to find Luca in the doorway. He wore dark jeans and a black sweater, and he looked as tired as she felt. "I keep thinking about what happens next," she admitted. "We can't stay here forever." "Why not?" The question surprised her. "Because this isn't our life. This isn't our world." Luca moved to the coffee maker and started brewing a fresh pot. His movements were efficient and quiet, like everything else about him. "What is your world, Evie? Working double shifts at a diner for tips that barely cover rent? Lying awake worried about bills you can't pay? Running from men who think they own you?" His words stung because they painted such an accurate picture of her life before Rick, before the mansion, before everything changed on Christmas Eve. "At least it was honest," she said. "Honest poverty is still poverty. Honest fear is still fear." The coffee finished brewing, and Luca poured 2 cups. He handed her one, and their fingers brushed. The simple touch sent warmth up her arm. "Why do you care what happens to us?" she asked. Luca was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than usual. 3 years ago, I stopped caring about anything except business. It was easier that way. Safer. But watching Jamie learn chess, seeing him smile," he paused. "It reminded me what I used to care about, what I lost." "We're not your family, Luca." "No," he agreed. "But you could be." The words hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Evie's heart pounded, but not from fear this time. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I know you'd die before you let anyone hurt Jamie. I know you're stronger than you think and braver than you believe. I know you make me want to be something better than what I am." Before Evie could respond, an alarm started beeping, soft but insistent. Luca's entire body went tense. "Stay here," he ordered, already moving toward the door. "Lock it behind me and don't come out until I come back." "What's happening?" But he was already gone, speaking rapidly into a phone as he disappeared down the hallway. Evie locked the door and ran to check on Jamie. He was awake, sitting up in bed with wide eyes. "It's okay," she told him, climbing onto the bed and pulling him close. "Luca's handling it." Through the bulletproof windows, she could see men with flashlights moving across the snowy grounds. Whatever was happening, it was serious. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Pretty view from up here. Nice and warm inside while it's so cold out here. Would hate for something to happen to all that glass." Evie's blood turned to ice. Someone was out there close enough to see into their room, close enough to... The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing everything in a red glow that made the world look like a nightmare. Jamie pressed closer to her, shaking. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Too many to be just Luca and his men. Voices she didn't recognize. The sound of doors being kicked open. Evie grabbed Jamie and pulled him toward the bathroom. It was the only room without windows, the safest place she could think of. They huddled in the corner while chaos erupted outside. Gunshots, shouting, the crash of something heavy hitting the floor. Then silence. The silence was worse than the noise. It stretched on forever, broken only by Jamie's quiet breathing and the thunder of Evie's heartbeat. A key turned in the lock of their suite door. "Evie?" Luca's voice, but strained. Hurt. She opened the bathroom door carefully. Luca stood in the main room, holding his left arm against his side. Blood seeped between his fingers. "Oh, God," Evie breathed, rushing to him. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, just a scratch." But his face was pale, and he was breathing too fast. Jamie appeared beside Evie, staring at the blood with worried eyes. Without hesitation, he ran to get the first aid kit from the kitchen cabinet. "Smart kid," Lucas said with a weak smile. Evie helped him sit down and carefully moved his hand away from the wound. The bullet had grazed his arm, tearing through the sweater and leaving a bloody groove in his skin. It could have been so much worse. "This is going to hurt," she warned, cleaning the wound with antiseptic. Luca didn't flinch, but she felt the tension in his muscles. Jamie stood beside them, holding gauze and tape like a tiny assistant. "How many were there?" Evie asked as she bandaged the wound. "4. They won't be coming back." "Are they—" "2 are in the hospital. 2 are in the morgue." Luca's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "They made their choice when they came after what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel protected, safe. Like nothing in the world could hurt her or Jamie as long as Luca was there to stand between them and the darkness. Jamie tugged on Luca's good arm and pointed to the chess piece he'd dropped when he ran to get the first aid kit. "It's okay, little knight," Luca said, picking up the white piece and handing it back to Jamie. "We protected what matters." As dawn broke over the mansion, Evie sat beside Luca's bed while he slept. The doctors had said the wound was clean and would heal fine. He'd been lucky. But watching him sleep, seeing how young and vulnerable he looked without his cold mask, she realized luck had nothing to do with it. He'd put himself between danger and them without hesitation, just like he'd promised. Jamie crawled onto the bed and curled up next to Luca, careful not to bump his injured arm. Even asleep, Luca's good arm came up to hold the little boy close. They looked like family. Father and son, protective and protected. And watching them, Evie felt something shift in her chest. A wall she'd built around her own heart starting to crack. She'd been so focused on keeping Jamie safe that she'd forgotten they both deserved more than just survival. They deserved love, belonging, a real home with people who chose to stay. When Luca woke up a few hours later, he found them both asleep beside him. Jamie was still clutching his chess piece, and Evie's hand was resting on Luca's chest, right over his heart. For the first time in 3 years, Luca felt like he was exactly where he belonged. "Marco?" he called quietly. His friend appeared in the doorway immediately. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got shot. What's the situation?" "Rick's dead, killed in a shootout with the Torinos last night. Seems they blamed him when their men failed to take your house. The surviving Torino soldiers are in jail or the hospital. Their boss is already reaching out through intermediaries, looking to make peace." Luca absorbed this information with relief and something else, disappointment that he hadn't been the one to end Rick himself. "So it's over?" "Looks like it. The Torinos know they bit off more than they could chew. They'll leave you alone now." "And Evie and Jamie?" Marco looked at the woman and child sleeping peacefully beside his boss and smiled. "I think they're exactly where they're supposed to be." Later that day, after Jamie woke up and had breakfast, Luca found himself teaching chess again. But this time felt different, more relaxed, like they had all the time in the world. "Castle," Luca said, showing Jamie how to move the king and rook together. Sometimes the most important piece has to hide behind walls to stay safe. Jamie nodded seriously and practiced the move. Then he pointed to the white knight and looked at Luca with a question in his eyes. Knights are different, Luca explained. They're the only pieces that can jump over others. They find ways around obstacles that stop everyone else. Jamie smiled and moved his knight in the special L shape Luca had taught him. Then he pointed to himself and then to the knight. "That's right," Luca said softly. "You're my little knight. You find ways through problems that would stop anyone else." For the rest of the afternoon, they played chess while Evie watched from a nearby chair. The sight of them together, dark head and light head bent over the beautiful game board, made her heart ache with longing. This could be her life, their life, safe and warm and full of small, perfect moments. But that night, as she tucked Jamie into his own bed in their own room, reality crept back in. They were guests here. Charity cases, no matter how welcome Luca made them feel, this wasn't really their home. "We should start looking for our own place," she told Teresa the next morning as they made breakfast together. Teresa's hand stilled on the eggs she was scrambling. "Why would you want to do that, dear?" "Because we can't stay here forever. Luca's been kind, but we need to build our own life." "Have you talked to Luca about this?" "It's not up to him." Teresa turned to face her with sad, knowing eyes. "Oh, honey, love is always a choice, but sometimes we choose fear instead because it feels safer." "I'm not afraid." "No." "Then why are you planning to leave the first place Jamie's been happy since your parents died? Why are you running from the first man who's made you feel safe in years?" Before Evie could answer, Jamie appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was dressed and ready for the day, clutching his chess piece as always. But there was something different about his expression. More alert, more present. He walked straight to Evie and tugged on her sleeve. Then he pointed to himself, to her, and then toward the rest of the house. "What is it, buddy?" Jamie's mouth opened, and for a heartbreaking moment, nothing came out. Then, so quietly, it was almost a whisper. "Home." Evie's coffee cup crashed to the floor. It was the first word he'd spoken in 6 months, and he'd used it to tell her that this was where he belonged. Evie stared at Jamie, her heart hammering against her ribs. The coffee mug lay in pieces at her feet, but she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "What did you say, buddy?" she whispered. Jamie's brown eyes were bright and sure. He pointed around the kitchen, then at himself and Evie again. "Home," he repeated, stronger this time. Teresa made a soft sound of joy and pressed her hands to her heart. "Oh, sweet boy. Yes, this is your home." Evie knelt down and pulled Jamie into her arms. He felt solid and real and miraculous. "You talked," she said through her tears. "You found your voice." Jamie nodded against her shoulder. Then he pulled back and looked at her with an expression far too serious for a 7-year-old. "Don't leave," he said simply. The words hit her like a physical blow. All this time she'd been planning their escape, thinking she was protecting him. But Jamie didn't want to be protected from this place. He wanted to stay. "Jamie, Luca is good," Jamie interrupted, speaking slowly but clearly. "He keeps us safe. He teaches me chess. He makes you smile." Out of the mouths of babes. Evie realized she had been smiling more these past few weeks. Real smiles, not the fake ones she used to wear for customers at the diner or to convince Jamie everything was okay when it wasn't. "We can't just stay because we want to, buddy. It's more complicated than that." But even as she said it, she wondered if it really was, or if she was just making it complicated because the simple truth felt too scary to accept. Footsteps in the hallway announced Luca's arrival. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, his left arm still in a sling but looking much better than he had yesterday. "Everything okay? I heard something break." "Jamie talked," Evie said, still kneeling on the floor surrounded by coffee mug pieces. Luca went very still. "What did he say?" "Home?" Teresa answered when Evie couldn't find her voice. "He said this is home." Something powerful crossed Luca's face. He looked at Jamie with wonder, like he was seeing a miracle. "Is that true, little knight?" Jamie nodded and walked over to Luca. "Will you teach me more chess today?" "Of course." Luca's voice was rough with emotion. "We can play as much as you want." That afternoon, while Jamie napped, Evie found herself walking through the mansion's halls, really looking at it for the first time since that first frightening night. She'd been so focused on leaving that she hadn't noticed how it had started to feel familiar, comfortable. The Christmas decorations were still up, twinkling lights and garland that made everything feel warm and festive. Jamie had helped Teresa hang ornaments on the enormous tree in the living room. His face had glowed with happiness as he placed each delicate glass ball just so. She found Luca in his study, staring out the window at the snow-covered gardens. His injured arm was healing well, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Having second thoughts about taking in strays?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his dark eyes took her breath away. "Are you?" "About what?" "Staying." There it was. The question that had been dancing around them for days. The elephant in the room that they'd both been too scared to address directly. "I don't know if we fit in your world, Luca. My world is whatever I make it, and I want to make it include you and Jamie." His honesty was devastating. No games, no pretty words, just the simple truth laid bare between them. What if it doesn't work? What if Jamie gets hurt? What if it does work? Luca interrupted. What if Jamie grows up safe and loved? What if you never have to count tip money again or lie awake worrying about rent? What if we build something real together? Evie's chest felt tight. "You don't understand. I'm not like the women in your world. I don't know how to be fancy or sophisticated. I work at a diner, Luca. I buy clothes from thrift stores. I don't belong in a place like this. Do you think I care about any of that?" He moved closer, his eyes never leaving her face. "You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who kept a traumatized child together with love and determination. Someone who'd rather work herself to exhaustion than take charity. Someone brave enough to jump in a stranger's car to protect her brother. You see someone desperate and stupid. I see someone extraordinary." The words hung between them like a promise. Evie wanted to believe them so badly it hurt. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of me? Of this. Of caring too much. Of Jamie getting attached and then losing another person he loves." Luca was quiet for a long moment. 3 years ago, I thought the safest thing was to stop caring about anyone, to lock my heart away where it couldn't be broken again. But you and Jamie didn't ask permission to matter to me. You just did." He moved to his desk and picked up the framed photo of his wife and daughter. For a moment, he just looked at it, his face soft with old grief. "Sophia would have loved you," he said finally. "She always said home wasn't a place. It was people choosing each other every day. Choosing to stay, to fight for something better, to build love instead of walls." Evie felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to choose you every day. I want to choose Jamie. I want us to be a family, not just 3 people hiding from the world in the same house. Even though your world is dangerous, even though people might come after us again, I'll protect you, both of you. That's what I do for the people I love." Love. He'd said it so simply, like it was just a fact, like loving them was as natural as breathing. Luca, before she could finish her thought, Jamie appeared in the doorway. He was holding something in his hands, a chess piece, but not his usual white knight. "I made this for you," he said, walking over to Evie. It was a white queen, carved carefully from soap with a plastic knife. The details were rough, but it was clearly made with enormous care and love. "Jamie, it's beautiful. When did you make this?" "This morning, while you were making breakfast." He held it out to her with a shy smile. "Queens protect everyone, like you protect me." Evie's heart shattered and rebuilt itself all at once. This little boy who'd lost so much was still capable of creating beauty, of expressing love through careful work and thoughtful gifts. "Thank you, buddy. I'll treasure it always." Jamie beamed, then looked between her and Luca with hopeful eyes. "Are we staying? Really staying?" Evie looked at Luca, this complicated man who'd opened his home and heart to them, who'd risked his life to keep them safe, who looked at Jamie like he was precious and at her like she was the answer to prayers he'd stopped believing in. "What would that look like?" she asked. "Really staying?" "It would look like Jamie learning to play chess like a master, like you never having to worry about money or safety again, like Sunday mornings in bed and family dinners and teaching Jamie to drive when he's old enough." Luca's voice grew softer. "It would look like love, Evie. Real, lasting, choose each other everyday love." "And if I'm not good at being a mafia boss's wife, then I'll stop being a mafia boss." The simple statement shocked her. "You can't do that. This is your life, your business." "My business is making sure the people I care about are safe and happy. If that means walking away from everything else, then that's what I'll do." Evie stared at him, seeing the truth in his eyes. He meant it. He would give up his empire, his power, his entire world, if that's what it took to keep her and Jamie. But that's when she realized something important. She didn't want him to change who he was. She wanted to be brave enough to love who he already was. "What if," she said slowly, "instead of you becoming someone different, we figured out how to make this work, how to be a family in your world?" Hope flickered across Luca's face. "Are you sure?" "No," she said honestly. "I'm terrified. But Jamie's right. This feels like home. You feel like home. And maybe that's worth being scared for." Jamie whooped with joy and launched himself at both of them, wrapping his arms around their waist. Luca laughed, actually laughed, and pulled them both close with his good arm. "So we're really doing this?" Evie asked, looking up at Luca. "We're really doing this?" He kissed her then, soft and sure and full of promise. It tasted like coffee and hope and the beginning of something beautiful. 6 months later, the mansion felt completely different. Not like a museum or a fortress, but like a real home where real people lived and loved and laughed. Jamie's voice had grown stronger every day. Now he chattered constantly about chess, strategies, about books Teresa read to him, about the garden he was planning for spring. His nightmares had faded, replaced by dreams of becoming a chess grandmaster. The chess set in Luca's study had been moved to the family room, where anyone could play. Jamie had beaten Luca twice in the past month, which filled Luca with ridiculous pride. Evie had discovered that being part of Luca's world didn't mean losing herself. She still worked, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Luca had helped her open a small cafe near downtown, where she served the kind of comfort food that made people feel at home. It was always busy, always full of laughter and good smells and satisfied customers. But the best part was coming home every evening to find Luca and Jamie bent over homework or chess problems, completely absorbed in each other's company. "How was the cafe today?" Luca would ask, kissing her hello. "Good." Mrs. Patterson brought her grandson in again. He's getting so big. She'd ruffle Jamie's hair. How was school, buddy? I got an A on my book report. And Tommy asked if I wanted to come to his birthday party next weekend. These small, ordinary moments felt like the greatest luxury Evie had ever known. On a snowy evening in December, almost a year to the day since she jumped into Luca's car, Evie found him in their bedroom getting dressed for dinner. They were having guests, Marco and his new girlfriend, Teresa's daughter visiting from college, some neighbors who'd become real friends. Need help with that? She asked, noticing him struggling with his cufflinks. Please. She fastened the gold links, her fingers gentle against his wrists. Even now, after all these months touching him, still sent warmth through her entire body. Evie, he said quietly. Do you ever regret it? Staying. She looked up at him, this man who'd saved them and let them save him right back. Never? Do you regret taking in a couple of strays? Best decision I ever made. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you. I love you too. Downstairs, Jamie was helping Teresa set the table, chattering about the chess tournament at school. When he saw Evie and Luca come down the stairs together, he grinned. You look fancy, he told them. So do you, little knight, Luca replied. As their guests arrived and the house filled with warmth and laughter, Evie realized this was what happy endings really looked like. Not perfect, but real. Not without challenges, but full of people committed to facing them together. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Jamie was asleep, Evie and Luca sat by the fire in his study. The chess set waited on the table between them, pieces arranged for a new game. Your move, Luca said. Evie looked at the board, then at him. I think I already made it. That night I got in your car. Best move you ever made. Second best, she corrected, moving her white queen to protect her king. The best was choosing to stay. Luca captured one of her pawns, then looked up at her with eyes full of love and promise. Want to know a secret? Always. I was never going to let you leave anyway. Evie laughed, the sound bright and free and full of joy. Outside snow began to fall again, covering their world in fresh possibilities. But inside their home, their real, true home, everything was exactly as it should be. 3 people who'd found each other in the darkness, choosing love over fear, family over loneliness, hope over the safe emptiness of walls around their hearts. And in the morning, Jamie would wake up talking and laughing, ready to tackle new chess problems and make new friends, and grow up safe in the knowledge that he was loved completely. Which, Evie thought, as Luca made his next move on the chessboard, was the very best kind of fairy tale ending there was. The kind that was real.